Kate Middleton had no idea that Tuesday morning when she went to Prince George's School that she would encounter such a thing. Dr. Benjamin Hayes, the principal of Thomas's Battersea School, had called Kate to his office, and what he was going to say wasn't about George's future. The truth that the principal revealed to Kate shocked her so much that Kate was in tears when she left the office, because Dr. Hayes had told Kate a truth about George that she never wanted to hear. Welcome to Princess Kate Stories channel. Before we start our story, please mention in the comments which city you're watching us from today, and if you believe such stories should be remembered, press the subscribe button and help us ensure these are remembered. That Tuesday morning at 9:30 a.m., Kate Middleton was having her tea in her room at Kensington Palace when the phone rang. When she saw the caller was from Thomas's Battersea School, she first thought George was sick. "Mrs. Cambridge, this is Dr. Benjamin Hayes, the school principal," said the voice on the other end. "I need to tell you that you urgently need to come to school." Kate's heart began to race. Did something happen to George? Is he okay? "George is physically fine, Mrs. Cambridge, but there's a very important matter I need to discuss with you. Can you come as soon as possible?" Kate noticed the seriousness in Dr. Hayes's voice. This man, who had been principal for 15 years, had never spoken so formally. "Of course, I'll come right away. Is this about George's academic performance?" Dr. Hayes paused. "Mrs. Cambridge, it's not appropriate for us to discuss this over the phone. Please come to my office." Kate became worried after hanging up the phone. She was alone since William was on an official visit to Australia. When Kate arrived at Thomas's Battersea School in the royal car, there wasn't the usual calm in the schoolyard. Some parents were talking in small groups, as if they had come to pick up their children early. The security guard recognized Kate. "Mrs. Cambridge, Dr. Hayes is waiting for you. You can go directly to his office." As Kate climbed the stairs, the behavior of the teacher she saw in the corridors was strange. Everyone was treating her with respectful courtesy, but avoiding eye contact. Miss Charlotte, George's class teacher, only nodded when she saw Kate. This attitude from Miss Charlotte, who was always cheerful, worried Kate. When she knocked on Dr. Hayes's office door, the "come in" sounded tired. Dr. Benjamin Hayes was a 55-year-old man with gray hair and a serious appearance. He had been the principal of Thomas's Battersea School for 20 years and was known to be experienced in working with the royal family. When Kate entered the office, he stood up but didn't have his usual warm greeting. The office was organized as usual. Certificates and awards showing the school's achievements hung on the walls. Dr. Hayes's desk was normally clean and organized, but today thick files and papers were scattered on the desk. "Mrs. Cambridge, please sit," said Dr. Hayes, pointing to the thick file on his desk. His voice sounded more formal and tense than usual. Kate sat in the chair across from him and immediately noticed the file on the desk. It read, "Prince George Alexander Louis, confidential." The thickness of this file worried Kate. Normally, student files weren't this thick. Dr. Hayes walked toward the window and looked outside for a while, as if thinking about how to express what he was going to say. Then he turned and looked into Kate's eyes. "Dr. Hayes, what happened to George? I'm very worried," Kate said, feeling the panic in her voice increasing. The principal took a deep breath and leaned against the edge of his desk. "Mrs. Cambridge, I'm aware that what I'm going to tell you won't be easy, but we have serious concerns about George's behavior at school." Kate was surprised and leaned forward slightly. "His behavior? George is a very well-behaved child. We don't have any problems at home." Dr. Hayes opened the file and pulled out pages of reports. "Unfortunately, the situation at school is different. For the past 3 weeks, we've been having serious problems with George's relationships with other students." Kate, seeing the seriousness on Dr. Hayes's face, realized the situation was much more serious than she thought. Dr. Hayes placed the reports he had taken from the file in front of Kate. "Mrs. Cambridge, George has started acting superior to other children. He says, 'I'm a prince. I'm above you, and asks his friends to serve him. Kate couldn't believe it. This is impossible. We never taught George such things. What's worse, Dr. Hayes continued, George belittles his friends' parents. He makes statements like, "My mother is a princess. Your mother is ordinary." Kate's face reddened. "Dr. Hayes, these are all childish behaviors. George is only 9 years old." "Mrs. Cambridge, it's not over yet." Dr. Hayes pulled out another report. "Last week, George threw his friend Oliver's sandwich in the trash and said princes don't eat such food." Kate was now in defense mode. Children sometimes do strange things. "And yesterday," Dr. Hayes interrupted, "George told his classmate Emma, 'You're an ordinary girl. You can't talk to me.'" Dr. Hayes pulled out an even thicker report from the file. "Mrs. Cambridge, our main concern is that George's behavior is getting progressively worse. Even this morning—" "What happened this morning?" Kate asked anxiously. "George told his teacher, Miss Charlotte, 'You are my servant. You can't give me orders.'" Kate jumped up. "This is impossible. George never talks like that." "Unfortunately, Mrs. Cambridge, there are witnesses. Both Miss Charlotte and the 15 students in the class heard it." Kate sat back down, this time more worried. "Moreover," Dr. Hayes continued, "George asks his friends to bow and greet him. He's acting like a little king." Kate's world was collapsing. "So what do the families say?" "Here's the real problem," Dr. Hayes said. 12 families are threatening to remove their children from school." Dr. Hayes pulled out another file from his desk. "Mrs. Cambridge, these are family complaints. Oliver's mother, Mrs. Smith, wrote in her letter that her son no longer wants to come to school." Kate took the letter and read, "My son has lost his self-confidence due to Prince George constantly belittling him." Emma's father, Mr. Jones, is even harsher, Dr. Hayes continued. "He wrote that his daughter comes home crying because of George, saying I'm not worthy of being the prince's friend." Kate's eyes began to fill with tears. "Mrs. Cambridge, a total of 8 families have made formal complaints. The children are afraid of George." "Afraid?" Kate was surprised. "George tells his friends things like, 'If you don't be friends with me, my father will have you imprisoned.'" Kate couldn't stand it anymore. "Dr. Hayes, where is George learning these things?" Dr. Hayes opened the thickest file without hesitation. "Mrs. Cambridge, our main concern is where George's behavior is coming from. Our school psychologist, Dr. Sarah Wilson, met with George. And George says he hears very specific things about the royal family at home. He thinks there are big differences between ordinary people and the royal family." Kate was surprised. "We never told George such things." "According to Dr. Wilson, George is probably hearing adult conversations and misinterpreting them." Dr. Hayes paused. "But our main concern is George saying, 'I'm going to be king when I grow up, so my behavior now doesn't matter.'" Kate's heart stopped. "What does that mean?" "George thinks that because he knows he'll be king in the future, the rules don't apply to him now." Dr. Hayes looked at Kate with his most serious expression. "Mrs. Cambridge, the Teachers' Council met and we made a decision." Kate's heart began racing wildly. "What decision?" "If George's behavior doesn't improve, we'll have to remove him from school." Kate jumped up. "What? Are you going to expel George from school?" "Mrs. Cambridge, we also have to think about our other 180 students. George's behavior is disrupting the classroom atmosphere." Kate began to cry. "Dr. Hayes, please. George is only 9 years old." "That's why we're giving you 2 weeks. If George's behavior doesn't improve, we suggest you look for another school." Kate was in shock. 2 weeks? "And Mrs. Cambridge," Dr. Hayes added, "if this situation leaks to the media, our situation will become even more difficult." Kate could no longer control herself. Tears were flowing like a river, and her hands began to tremble. She had never encountered such a situation. She never imagined that George would face such a serious problem. Dr. Hayes, please understand. George is not a normal child. He's the future king. The difficulty of this situation. Kate's voice was cracking. She was having trouble completing her words. Mrs. Cambridge, Dr. Hayes interrupted calmly but firmly, that's exactly the problem. George is using this special status as a weapon. Kate stood up and began pacing around the room, as if moving would help her. She covered her face with her hands and tried to take deep breaths. I'm starting to question what kind of mother I am, she murmured. Did we teach George the wrong things? Did we spoil him? Dr. Hayes was uncomfortable seeing Kate in such a broken state. Mrs. Cambridge, don't blame yourself. These kinds of situations can sometimes arise. Kate asked tremblingly, So what do you want me to do? How have I failed as a mother? Tears were flowing down her cheeks, her voice becoming increasingly hoarse. You need to have a serious conversation with George. He needs to understand that his behavior at school is unacceptable. And perhaps most importantly, you need to teach him that royal titles are a responsibility, not a privilege. But he's just a child! Kate's voice was full of desperation. How can we expect a 9-year-old child to understand such deep concepts? Mrs. Cambridge, 9-year-old children can also learn respect. George's problem is disrespect and lack of empathy. This can be taught. Kate's eyes were filled with hopelessness. What if we can't succeed? What if George doesn't change? Dr. Hayes watched Kate silently, then added in a soft voice, Then unfortunately we'll have to consider our other options. Kate stood up. I'll talk to William. We'll solve this situation. I hope so, Mrs. Cambridge, because George's future is at risk. As Kate left the office, she encountered Miss Charlotte in the corridor. Mrs. Cambridge, the teacher said in a sad voice, George is really a very smart child, but what, Miss Charlotte? But he really upsets the other children. Yesterday, Emma called her mother crying. Kate's tears started again. What am I going to do? Talk to George. Teach him what friendship and respect mean. When Kate went out to the schoolyard, some parents ignored her. This had never happened before. Mrs. Smith, Oliver's mother, moved away when she saw Kate. While Kate sat in the car, she called William. Since William was in Australia, there was a time difference. Kate? What happened? Kate told him through tears. William, I learned terrible things about George. William became worried. What happened to George? Kate told him everything. George's behavior at school, family complaints, the school administration's threat. William was surprised. This is impossible, Kate. George never behaves like this at home. But he does at school, William. The principal gave us 2 weeks. Kate, calm down. I'm returning tomorrow. We'll talk to George together. What if it gets in the media, William? Can you imagine headlines like Prince George expelled from school? William's voice became tense. We can't allow this situation to leak to the media. That evening, Kate called George to her room. George, today I spoke with Dr. Hayes from your school. George grinned. Doctor? Hayes is very boring. He constantly tells me about rules. George, let's talk about how you treat your friends. George shrugged. They're not my friends. I'm a prince. Kate was surprised. George, friendship isn't about royal titles. But Mom, you always say I'm special. Kate understood. George was confusing being special with being superior. George, being special doesn't mean belittling others. But I'm the future king, my teacher told me. Kate's heart ached. George's innocent child logic was leading him to wrong conclusions. The next day, William urgently returned to London. Kate told him the situation again. I talked to George, William. He really thinks these behaviors are normal. William was worried. So what are we going to do? Dr. Hayes said George will be expelled from school if his behavior doesn't change. William got angry. No school can expel a member of the royal family. William, this would be bad for George's future. If the media learns about the situation, William understood. You're right. We need to have a serious conversation with George. That evening, William and Kate called George. George, William said, we're going to talk about how you treat your friends at school. George looked with innocent eyes. I didn't do anything bad, Dad. William explained patiently. George, being a prince means responsibility, not belittling others. In the following days, Kate and William did special educational work with George. They taught him the concepts of empathy, respect, and friendship. Psychologist Dr. Wilson was also involved in the process. She explained to George the difference between being special and acting superior. 2 weeks later, Kate met with Dr. Hayes again. Mrs. Cambridge, we're seeing positive changes in George. He apologized to his friends. Kate was relieved. Really? Yesterday, George apologized to Oliver for the sandwich and shared his own sandwich. Kate smiled. George is learning. And he also wrote a very nice apology letter to Miss Charlotte. 3 months later, George had become one of the most popular children at school. He was treating his friends with respect and had learned to share. Kate thanked Dr. Hayes. I apologize for this difficult process. Mrs. Cambridge, children learn. George is now both a prince and a good friend. This incident taught Kate an important lesson. Royal titles should be explained correctly to children, otherwise they can be misunderstood. George was now both the future king and a humble child. And Dr. Hayes's difficult conversation had actually been the most important turning point in shaping George's character. This story showed that sometimes the most difficult truths are the beginning of the most beautiful changes. If you want to hear more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and click the like button. See you in the next video.